Prepositions. What are they and how do they work and why do we care? That is the subject for today on Hebrew Help with Sup Here. Extra info for the grammatically impaired. Welcome back to Hebrew Help. This video is a quick introduction to the grammatical term preposition. This video is extra info for the grammatically impaired, which means that it is about grammar in general and not specifically about how something works in Hebrew, although it does have examples from English and from Hebrew. Prepositions are all about a noun phrase's relationship to another word in a sentence. A noun phrase is a noun with all of the parts that go with it, like articles and adjectives and other descriptors, and including other prepositional phrases. So noun phrases can be really long, or they can just be one noun, or even not a noun, a pronoun. Prepositions are called that because the pre part means before, and so they are always positioned before a noun phrase. Other languages have postpositions instead of prepositions, and in those languages, all of these little words that have the same purpose come after the noun phrase instead of before it. Hebrew does not have any postpositions, so that makes it easier for us. So what is a preposition? Well, when we are kids, we often learn that a preposition is something that a bunny can do to a log. It can go over a log or under a log or through a log or around a log. It can be on a log or far from a log or near a log. So all of these words, over, under, through, around, on, far from, near, they're all prepositions. They come before the noun phrase, which in all of these cases is the log. There are two problems with this method of trying to determine what is a preposition. First, there are scores of prepositions that do not describe a physical relationship. Look at this list. I found this list on Wikipedia and even whittled a bunch out because I didn't agree that they were all prepositions or I felt like they were obscure or archaic. Even so, over half of these prepositions do not describe any kind of a physical relationship, like with a bunny and a log. Anyway, another problem for English speakers trying to figure out if something is a preposition is that a lot of these words do double duty. Doing double duty means that a single word can exist in more than one part of speech. So it can act like a noun or a verb, depending on how it is used in the sentence. Or it can act like a preposition or a verbal particle. So let's look at a quick example. Up means toward the top of something, like up the hill. In these sentences, she lives up the hill, or I am going up the hill. Up clearly means in the direction of the top of the hill. So in sentences like these, up is the preposition, and the hill is the object of the preposition. So the whole phrase, up the hill, is the prepositional phrase. But I can also say, she's living it up, or eat up. And neither of these sentences have anything to do with an upward direction. And they don't have a noun phrase after them. So the word up can be a preposition, but it can also be a verbal particle. A word that goes with a verb that can change the meaning or enhance it a little bit. So in order for a word to be a preposition in a particular sentence, the word has to have a noun phrase right after it, and you have to be able to look at your preposition and your noun phrase and say, yes, this whole phrase works together as a unit. So it can be helpful to also ask yourself, does this phrase itself, the word I think is a preposition plus the noun phrase right after it, answer a particular question? And is there a word right before the phrase that is getting that extra information that we're answering the question of? The student in the front row always takes notes on her computer. In the front row is a prepositional phrase that answers the question, which student? So it's pointing back to the student. On her computer answers the question, how does she take notes? So it points back to the verb take. In usually I walk to school, but today I drove because of the rain. To school answers the question where or where to, and it's giving more information about the walking. And because of the rain answers the question why I drove. So it's giving more information about the driving. So I said that the prepositional phrase is answering a question about a word before it, but the word doesn't always have to be before it. We all know this sentence from the very beginning of the Tanakh. Now, many of the more recent editions of the Bible, including my own JPS, translate this phrase as when the Lord began to create the heavens and the earth. But that doesn't change the fact that in the beginning, the Lord created the heavens and the earth is a perfectly good sentence in English. And it starts with the preposition in. So if we're trying to do our little preposition test, we think of in plus its noun phrase, the beginning. So we have in the beginning. What question does that answer? It answers the question of when. But when what? There's nothing right before it. It's at the beginning of the sentence. Well, when did the Lord create? The Lord created in the beginning. So the word that this prepositional phrase points to is after it. And that's okay. It's just that it's more common for the word to be before the prepositional phrase that points to it, especially if that word is a noun. One of the difficulties of learning a language is that there are lots of verbs and adjectives that require prepositions after them, and there's really no rhyme or reason to which preposition they're using. It's very specific to whatever language, and it can be really hard for us to remember what preposition we're supposed to be using in the new language that we're trying to learn. So, for example, in English, when we want to say I'm proud of somebody, we say proud of, right? But why of? What is the purpose of the preposition of? Or, is that answering a question like what I was just talking about? Not really. It's just the way that that English works is that proud is always followed by of if we're going to be proud of a thing or a person. We can, of course, just say, I'm proud, but we cannot say, I'm proud, my son, or I'm proud, my achievements. We have to have of in there. Now, in Hebrew, when we say we're proud of somebody, we use a preposition that is never translated as of. We use the preposition be, which is usually translated as in or on sometimes. And so students, at the beginning, they first say, why? Why do we say ge'e ba or ge'e bo instead of something else? And there's no good answer. It's just that in Hebrew, ge'e requires the preposition be. Just like in English, the word proud requires the preposition of. And so because there's not a lot of rhyme or reason there, it's basically all just memorization. You have to, when you learn a new adjective or verb that's going to have some kind of a preposition after it, especially if it is a preposition that doesn't make sense in your head, you basically just have to memorize it. So when you learn the word ge'e, meaning proud, don't just learn ge'e, you learn ge'e be. I know your head is probably spinning, and I know I say something like that in almost every one of these extra info videos, but that's because I'm here to explain the hard stuff. The easy stuff doesn't need explaining. Some linguists spend their entire careers studying stuff like this and figuring out where past linguists have gotten it wrong for thousands of years. So it's complicated, and you don't need to be a linguist to learn a foreign language. But the goal of learning a modern language is usually to make sentences all by yourself, rather than being able to only repeat sentences that you've heard. And of course, biblical Hebrew learners have a different goal. They really just want to be able to read what is there in the Tanakh. But no matter what, understanding or at least being able to identify the basic word categories will really help you create sentences that make sense and or understand what you read and hear. So here is a list of common Hebrew prepositions. I'm sure you'll notice that there are a lot fewer on this list. I couldn't find a complete list like I did with English, but I think there are also just fewer total prepositions in Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is said to have about half of the words of modern English, and so it's perhaps not too surprising that it has fewer prepositions. And besides having fewer to learn, Hebrew prepositions are easier to identify than English ones because Hebrew does not have verbal particles. So if you see a word that's on the preposition list, then it is most likely a preposition. So I hope you understand prepositions a little better now, and I hope this will help you identify prepositions and prepositional phrases in Hebrew. As always, I wish you the best of luck. Lehitraot papa'am. See you next time.